Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this video lesson on key concepts of European history. This is part 3 of 3 video lessons. We are talking about period 4, 1914 to the present. I am Miss Jennifer Blank, and I will be your guide on this journey. So in the first few video lessons, we talked about the first 2 bullets. Now we're going to be discussing the last 3. Questioning the existence of objective knowledge, the intellectual, cultural, and artistic movements during the 20th century. Questioning the ability of reason to arrive at truth, and changes in the role of religion in determining moral standards, or defining moral standards. And also competing definitions of freedom and justice that changed everyday life experiences of people and nations. So without further ado, here we go. All right, so 4.3, a key concept. This is during the 20th century, diverse intellectual and cultural movements questioned the existence of objective knowledge, the ability of reason to arrive at truth, and the role of religion in determining moral standards, right? So what does this look like? Let me bring my little recorder guy down here again. All right, so the widely held belief in progress, characteristic of much of the 19th century thought, began to break down before World War I. The experience of war intensified a sense of anxiety that permeated many facets of thought and culture, giving way by the century's end to a plurality of intellectual frameworks. Okay, so this is important to understand when we're talking about worldview versus worldview of Europeans and even people in the world prior to the World Wars and then after. When World War I began, Europeans were generally confident in the ability of science and technology to address human needs and problems, despite the uncertainty created by new scientific theories and psychology. This is going to shift in the post-war era. Okay, the effect of World War and economic depression undermined this confidence in science and human reason. This gave impetus to existentialism and produced postmodernism in the post-1945 period. I'll discuss in greater detail in class what postmodernism actually is. But fundamentally, the world wars and the Great Depression, those 3 things combined, resulted in a massive shift in the European worldview, and this is important to note. Science and technology yielded impressive material benefits, but also caused immense destruction and posed challenges to objective knowledge. So the challenge to the certainties of the Newtonian universe in physics, this opened the door to uncertainty in other fields by undermining faith and objective knowledge, while also providing the knowledge necessary for the development of nuclear weapons and power. Okay, so whenever you have massive changes, you're going to have a mess because, the status quo makes everything stable and calm, but very boring. You want some drama, you're going to have to mess some stuff up. It's going to be chaotic. It's going to be messy, right? So there were both good and bad results from this massive change in worldview, but this uncertainty or lack of faith and objective knowledge has caused a great deal of divisiveness amongst modern world powers. Medical theories and technologies extended life, but posed social and moral questions that eluded consensus and crossed religious, political, and philosophical perspectives. Right? Military technologies made possible industrialized warfare, genocide, nuclear proliferation, and the risk of global nuclear war. Okay, so this is chiefly due to the development of the military-industrial complex, in addition to all of the various scientific advances we made during World War II, namely the atomic bomb, the development of nuclear energy, nuclear power, nuclear weaponry. There's a lot of issues you have to think about when you're dealing with this. So when you get these medical theories and technologies that do extend life, this is also contributed to the strain on the welfare state. When the welfare state was originally designed, we didn't have all this stuff. Okay, and so the life expectancy was 55, 60, maybe. In many cases, it was less than that. And now our life expectancy, at least in the United States, is 75 plus. That changes things. When you've got every person eligible for, say, Medicare and Social Security, that when the systems were created, were designed to last until people were 55 or 60, and now the standard is 75, 80. That's 20, 25 years more that the system has to shell out that it wasn't designed to. So it's not just a cultural shift. This is also, it has issues for demographics, issues for economics and politics as well. Organized religion continued to play a role in European social and cultural life despite the challenges of military and ideological conflict, modern secularism, and rapid social changes. So totalitarianism really represented and communism represented massive challenges to Central and Western Europe. And this brought mixed responses from Christian churches. Actually, originally, the Catholic Church supported Hitler and said, go ahead, who cares? And it was afterwards when the extent of the destruction and the death toll, the millions of people who died, that was we were made aware of that, then some people began to rethink that viewpoint. Reform in the Catholic Church found expression in the Second Vatican Council, which redefined the Church's dogma and practices and started to redefine its relations with other religious communities. Increased immigration into Europe also altered Europe's religious makeup, causing debate and conflict over the role of religion in social and political life. We're not talking about Christianity here. We're talking about the influx and presence of Jews and Muslims versus the established Christian culture that existed in Europe previously. Jews were always present in Europe, as were Muslims, but in terms of the increasing problems between the three religions, this would only increase over the course of the 20th century, and it is a problem now for Europe specifically. So during the 20th century, the arts were defined by experimentation, self-expression, subjectivity, and the increasing influence of the United States in both elite and popular culture. New movements in the visual arts, architecture, and music demolished existing aesthetic standards. They explored the subconscious and subjective states, and they satirized Western society and its values. Almost the goal of art in the modern era was to poke fun at the existence of modern culture and in political establishment. Throughout the century, a number of writers challenged traditional literary conventions. They directly questioned Western values, and they addressed controversial social and political issues. Increasing imports of United States technology and popular culture after World War II generated both enthusiasm and criticism, and the same is true to this very day. All right, so now let's move into key concept 4.4. Demographic changes, economic growth, total war, disruptions of traditional social patterns, and competing definitions of freedom and justice altered the experiences of everyday life. So, the 20th century was characterized by large-scale suffering that was brought on by warfare and genocide, as well as tremendous improvements in the standard of living. This is a really interesting juxtaposition of opposites here. You've got large-scale suffering of warfare and genocide. Now juxtapose that with tremendous improvements in the standard of living for a great number of millions of people. World War I did create a lost generation. It did foster disillusionment and cynicism, but it did transform the lives of women and democratize societies. Women found larger roles in the world wars because while the men were off fighting, women had to handle things at home. They had to be in the factories working. They had to become foremen. They had to build stuff. They had to do things that were traditionally male-dominated or male-only jobs, that women were just, you're in the kitchen and you raise the kids and that's what you do. And so this gave women a new sense of agency and actually made women as a gender realize, hey, listen, there's more to us than simply popping out babies and taking care of the house. Like, we can do more stuff, and we're pretty good at it. World War II decimated a generation of Russian and German men. It virtually destroyed European Jewry and forced large-scale ethnic migrations and undermined pre-war class hierarchies. So you're talking about a massive reorganization of European culture and European social structure. Whenever that happens, there's going to be some mess, some chaos, some issues. So World War II was definitely a watershed moment for the world generally, but for Europe specifically. Mass production, new food technologies, and industrial efficiency increased disposable income and created this consumer culture in which greater domestic comforts such as electricity, indoor plumbing, plastics, and synthetic fibers became available. So this is where you get the massive improvement in the standard of living. The idea that we could be more hygienic. I mean, indoor plumbing. I mean, can you imagine, right? I mean, just think about it. Pause right now. Just think. What if you did not have a toilet? No toilets, no sink. You had to go outside and pump from something, and pop the water out into this bucket and take it inside your dirt house. Not that things were, quite that bad in the immediately preceding era. But I mean, just contemplate the idea of not having indoor plumbing. Like, whoa. Think about not having plastics. Think about no electricity. I mean, our entire world would cease to function. It's fascinating when you think about how much that has altered how humans exist. New communication and transportation technologies multiplied the connections across space and time, transforming daily life and contributing to the proliferation of ideas and to globalization, which some folks really despise. They're like, stop globalization. Well, that's really kind of you can't. Globalization is a reality. It's all in the question is how one deals with it, or how a nation will deal with it. But globalization is not something that's going to be stopped. Communication and transportation technologies would make that impossible. The lives of women were defined by family and work responsibilities, economic changes, and feminism. So during the World Wars, women, like I said, became increasingly involved in military and political mobilization, as well as in economic production. Now, in Western Europe, through the efforts of feminists, and in Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union through government policy, women finally gained the vote. They got greater education opportunities, access to professional careers, even while continuing to face social inequality. So the fact that women were able to make the strides that they made in spite of these pre-existing social inequalities is really tremendous. Well, economic recovery, with economic recovery altering World War II, the birth rate increased dramatically. That's known as the baby boom, an entire generation of folks who were born right after the war. All the men came home, they got married, they said, oh my God, I want to have a family, I want to do things, I almost died, but I didn't, yay, let's make things happen. This was often promoted by government policies because of the dramatic loss of life. They were looking to like rebolster the population. New modes of marriage, partnership, motherhood, divorce, and reproduction gave women a lot more options in their personal lives. So divorce became less and less of a taboo. Single women were able to function. The idea of what marriage meant was also being redefined, as much as some people would like to say, marriage has been the traditional institution for 2,000 years. Those people have never picked up a history book. I'm sorry, but the traditional definition of marriage that, existed 2,000 years ago was, we want to unite the families and gain an alliance with France. Like that's marriage, okay? Women had no say in it. So this idea that marriage has always functioned in this one way is boulder dash. Okay, I can't use the word I want to use because it's a video lesson and that would be inappropriate for the classroom environment. But you know what I'm talking about, okay? But it shifted as recently as the middle of the last century. Okay, so these roles and institutions are constantly being redefined, especially in our modern world, because things are constantly changing. Women were able to obtain high political office, increase the representation in legislative bodies in many nations. We even have female heads of state, not in the United States, but let's not go there. New voices also gained prominence in political, intellectual, and social discourse. So green parties in Western and Central Europe challenged consumerism. They urged sustainable development, and by the late 20th century, they also cautioned against globalization. Gay and lesbian movements worked for expanded civil rights, obtaining in some nations the right to form civil partnerships, and others full legal benefits and the right to marry. Okay, so we have massive changes for sexual minorities as well, further modifying the social structure and social hierarchy of Europe and the world. Intellectuals and youth reacted against the perceived bourgeoisie, materialism, and decadence, most significantly with the revolts of 1968. We'll talk about those in class. And because of the economic growth of the 1950s and the 1960s, numerous guest workers from Southern Europe, Asia, and Africa immigrated to Western and Central Europe. However, after the economic downturn in the 1970s, these workers and their families often became targets of anti-immigrant agitation and extreme nationalist political parties. As always, when things go wrong, you need a scapegoat, okay? In most cases, a scapegoat is almost as welcome as a solution to the problem, unfortunately. And this is an issue we're dealing with today as well, given the troubling economic, political, and social realities that the world is facing. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of period 4. That is also the end of our series of video lessons on the key concepts of European history. Study hard. The AP test cometh. I hope you learned what you needed to, and I will see you next time.